Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope that you are all having a great day, and let's hope this is a good one. So in my last video I talked a little bit about how I knew I was transgender, and I also referenced some things that kind of like helped to tip me over the edge and help me to decide I am trans and I need to do something about it. And I figured maybe I'll tell a few stories, not all of the stories because there's quite a few things which helped me get to that point, but I thought I'd tell a few stories about me, about some of the things that helped to sort of trigger the notion I'm trans, but also that I need to do something about it. So the first story I'm going to tell is about my trip to Malaysia, specifically to Kuala Lumpur. Now, I've told this story before, I think in my very first video, but I thought I'd add a little bit more colour just to kind of flesh out a little bit the significance and importance that I place on this particular trip. Now, for a bit of context, I was living in Sri Lanka at the time, where I was working with who is now my ex-wife, and I had the opportunity to go on a solo trip somewhere, and I was thinking, where could I go? I could go back to Singapore. I'd been there maybe a couple of months previously. It was alright, quite expensive though. I could go to maybe Indonesia, I could go to, well, all over the place. But I figured what I'll do is I'll go to Malaysia. I'll go on a little week-long trip to Kuala Lumpur because I've never been there and I'd heard great things about it. So I booked my flights and off I went. Now, since I can remember, I'd always been drawn to dressing in feminine clothing, but obviously very much in secret because I didn't want people to know this element about me. In fact, my ex-wife once found my little stash of clothes and she did not take it well. Divorce was bandied about as a possible outcome if I didn't stop dressing, which, you know, was a bit frustrating, but it didn't stop me from dressing, which I'm sure she would be very unhappy about, but also I think she probably realised this as well. Anyway, so this was at a time when I was really looking for opportunities to do just that. I suppose it had been a while since I'd done anything, and so I was researching things that I could do in Kuala Lumpur, and a thought crossed my mind, because I'm going to go there, I'm going to be there by myself, no one's going to know me there, and the likelihood is that no one's ever going to know me or see me ever again after I leave. So here's an opportunity to really push the boat out and try something new, something that I've never done before. So I thought, well, maybe I could get some stuff, but Sri Lanka's not great for clothing and whatnot. And I looked into whether or not you could get some kind of makeover whilst you're there, because I'd heard that this is a service which exists in other places in the world. So I did a quick Google search, and as luck would have it, I found an individual who was indeed offering male to female makeover services in Kuala Lumpur. So I thought, hey, why the hell not? Let's go for it. So I tracked him down on his, I think, Facebook page. He had a website with some promotional images of makeovers he'd offered in the past. It all looked good, looked pretty legit, so I dived right in. My trip to Kuala Lumpur was pretty good regardless of all of this. It's a wonderful city. I highly recommend that you go and visit. There's so much to do and see. I had some delicious food, checked out the architecture, the history is amazing. They've got some wonderful museums, but obviously my entire trip was leading up to this kind of pinnacle where I was able to not just get a makeover, but it was the first time I was publicly going to express myself. Even in my mind, it was just going to be with this one person who was offering the makeover. That was still pretty scary, but I was like, I'm in the hands of a professional. He knows what he's doing. He's seen this before. He's a bit like a doctor. So I put my fears to one side and I went to my appointment. So I went to my appointment and I was nervous. I was so nervous. As I said, I'd never, ever shared this part of myself with anybody else. It was definitely a step into the unknown, and I was placing my trust firmly in this person. As I said, I was relatively hopeful, trusting that they would deal with me in a compassionate way, and I'm happy to say, delighted to say, that the whole experience that first day was just amazing. We talked a lot about our preferred gender expressions, let's say, and he told me, and I'm referring to him as a he because he told me that he's not transgender, but he just likes cross-dressing. And I suppose at the time that's maybe kind of how I saw myself, although I was definitely questioning. And he would tell me how he had these regular customers who'd come over a few times a year just to get a taste of being a woman. I found that really sad that there were these people, sometimes these older gentle women, I suppose, who could only get subtle, small, tiny tastes of what it's like to be their true selves. So anyway, he did my makeup. He had so many clothes, goodness gracious. I was the proverbial kid in the candy store, I tell you, but he picked out a couple of outfits for me, and maybe not my normal choice, but that's fine. It's always good to get a different perspective on things, right? And he took a few pictures, he put them on a DVD, and I think I've destroyed it since because I just didn't want anybody finding the evidence, I suppose. But on that first makeover, we went out to a little restaurant near his house. And again, this was such a first. Not only the first time I was doing it with any other person, suddenly I was out in the world. I was walking around in public in full view of everybody. We went for a meal and it was, I don't know, I assume it was tasty because Malaysian food's delicious, but I just honestly cannot remember. I just remember sitting there in this restaurant, bag of nerves, absolutely petrified. And it was there where he gave me the idea, or he put it to me, that his birthday's coming up in a couple of days, and would I like to do the same thing, but for his birthday party he'd do the makeover and we'd go to another restaurant, we'd go clubbing. And much like Owen in I Saw the TV Glow, that felt like one step too far. I thought to myself, how could I possibly do such a thing? That's crazy. No, I can't do that. And then as I was leaving, as I was going back to my hotel, I thought, well, when am I ever going to get this opportunity again? Maybe never. There's nobody else here that I know. This is pretty safe, I suppose. And so I figured, let's go for it. So I extended my trip for a few days and sent him a message saying I'm in. Sent him some extra money because of course it was a paid for service. He's not doing this out of the kindness of his heart. And yeah, off I went for makeover number 2. And again, like being made over, having all that makeup applied and having a wig and all of that stuff, the result of that was so mind-shattering. To see myself looking back at me in the mirror for the first time, it was really quite something. And it really drove home the idea that this isn't just a phase, this isn't just a temporary thing. I need this in my life. And then we went out, and again it was so anxiety inducing. I was terrified just stepping out of the door, but there were a few other people there to celebrate his birthday, and they were friendly and they were supportive, and we were chatting and gossiping. We went to a restaurant, and goodness gracious, did I feel I was standing out like a sore thumb. I mean, I'm over 6 foot tall, and in Asia, especially where I'm the only white person in a particular space, being over 6 foot anyway, I cause a bit of a stir. People notice me and I was noticed, but no more so than usual, I didn't think. And then we went to the bar and we had a whale of a time. We had some drinks, I had a bit of a dance, used the bathroom, and there was no issues anywhere. It was amazing, and it all just felt so comfortable and so right and so true for me. I realized that no, I'm not a cross-dresser. This is me. And then, as I say in my first video, that moment when I was sitting in the mirror and he was removing like the fake eyelashes and the makeup and everything else, and I reverted to my male self, it was just so heartbreaking. The idea that I might never experience this again was the thing that motivated me to try this in the first place, but the idea that I might never do this again, it left me with a sense of hopelessness. And this was about, I don't know, I'm going to say about 12 years ago, something like that. So obviously it took a while from that dawning realization to now when I'm actually transitioning. So why did that take so long? Well, I've kind of talked about that in my previous video. And I think what's more important is what triggered that need to transition. And I'll tell you about those in a moment. Autumn is definitely arriving in Poland. Look at that. So, yeah, what were some of the things? So I'm going to tell you a couple of things that triggered some thoughts and realizations, and there were quite a few of these before I made this choice. So it's going to feel, maybe if you're just assuming that it's these two things that triggered it, then you're only hearing a very small part of that story. So the first thing was the funerals of my grandparents, my dad's parents, and obviously I went to both of those funerals. Oop, almost slipped over there, goodness. And it was kind of like the complete death. It was like the end of one phase of my life. I could no longer kind of like, there was a lot of childhood memories, thoughts and beliefs that I had that kind of died off with them, like the realization that I would never set foot inside a house where they'd lived or most of their lives as long as I'd known them. And this was a place where I'd had a lot of Christmases, I'd had a lot of birthdays, a lot of family gatherings had been had there, and I was never going to see that again. But beyond that, I remember sitting in the church and hearing the eulogies for my grandparents and learning all of these new things about them from their friends and from distant relatives that I barely knew. And the thought occurred to me that one day I will die. And what are people going to say about me in my eulogies? I don't know. I think funerals are just as much, or more so, for the living than for the dead. It's about how you connected with those individuals, but also you can come up with some self-reflections as well. At least I did. I'm a very reflective kind of woman, I guess. But the thought occurred to me, I don't want people to be eulogizing him, because that's not who I am. That's not me they'd be talking about. It would be a complete lie. And it just felt unfair to everybody to not at least introduce them to me, basically. And it was actually when I was back in the UK for one of those funerals that I came out to my mother. I felt like I really, really needed to, because I needed to start that process. I needed to start at least telling people about who I was. And that was about 4 years ago. The other experience that I want to talk about is something that happened at work. I love my job. I really do. I talk about it. I think I mentioned it before. But I've always had this kind of preconceived notion that to be successful in my job, I need to wear this mask. I need to hide elements of myself in order to be taken seriously by my colleagues. And I got a temporary promotion a couple of years ago, and I was absolutely terrified. I've always suffered from imposter syndrome, and this was like imposter syndrome like on steroids. It was crazy, and I was like, how am I ever going to kind of navigate this space when I'm surrounded by such stern and serious colleagues in like the senior leadership team? How can I ever kind of be part of that? But then they stood up, some of them, and they gave these presentations where they really did allow their characters to shine through. They were charismatic, they were funny, they were friendly, they were charming, they were messy, they were themselves. And it really struck home that actually maybe there is a space for me to be me at work. It was quite groundbreaking. And alongside doing that, this was kind of part of a workshop, and one of the tasks that we had to do for this workshop was some kind of personality test. And I don't put a lot of stock in personality tests. They might give you a kind of a snapshot of how you are on a particular day at a particular time, and also because most of them are kind of self-reporting, then you're filling it in based on perhaps how you would like to be or how you would like to be perceived, rather than how you actually are. But you know, all that aside, I took this personality test, and I'll put the link in the test in this video because I quite like that one. Maybe because it gave me the result that I wanted, but whatever. But when I was reading through like characteristics of my personality, it referenced how important authenticity is to me. And it occurred to me that this was so true. There was a lot in that kind of report that I agreed with. I think there were things in there that I needed to hear at that particular time. And it was just a little prod that reminded me of what I needed to do. And 2 years later, here I am. I did it. So yeah, these are just a few little anecdotes, a few stories of things that helped me along this journey. Somebody in the comments last time talked about how all of a sudden I've decided to come out, and it's like, no, there's nothing sudden about my journey. There's nothing sudden about my decision to do this. There's nothing sudden about my need to transition. It's been a very, very, very long process with a lot of these kinds of moments where I've kind of realized things and internalized things and learned things about myself and my place in the world and how I want to be in the world. And yeah, I'm so happy that I've had these experiences, even though a lot of them were quite painful and difficult at the time. I wouldn't be here today without having experienced those things. So, you know, I think every experience has helped me get to where I needed to be today. Anyway, so that's it for today. I hope that you enjoyed these little stories. And if you've had anything like this, if you've got any kind of anecdotes of your own, it doesn't have to be about transitioning. It doesn't have to be major. You know, just little things that have been kind of foundational events for you. Why don't you share them in the comments below? I always love hearing stories from my viewers. It really makes my day. So I really hope that you do. And also one more thing, little request. I'd really love it if you can like these videos. At some point, a lot of the time, I get kind of discovered by the transphobes and I get a bit of the dogpiling going on. So it'd be nice to know I've got a little bit of support out there. Anyway, take it easy. All the best. I'll see you again soon. Oh, and one more thing before I forget, a shout out to the viewer who recommended Robot Monster as a movie. It's really awesome. I highly recommend it. You got to go check it out, you guys. It's so funny.